To open the deck and access the inside compartment, you'll remove the 4 lock nuts on the left underside of the deck with your 8mm deep socket wrench. So after you've opened your deck, you want to disconnect the motor wire that connects to the controller. Move your battery cable out of the way. Pull out your motor wire, which has a silver connector on it. Open that counterclockwise to loosen it. Then unplug the connector. In order to remove the rear fender on your CycleBoard, make sure your deck is open first, then take your 3mm Allen wrench and loosen the 5 screws connecting your rear fender to the swing arm. Then position your fender out of the way. After disconnecting your motor cable, just push that out of the way. Take your 4mm Allen wrench and a 21mm socket. Loosen and remove the screw above the axle nut on both sides. Next, take your 21mm socket to loosen the axle nut on both sides. After removing your axle nuts and keeper screws, the motor should drop right out. When you lift the swing arm, if the motor's tight and it's not dropping out, you may need to align the axle flat sides with the slot using a crescent wrench, just so that it's straight and aligned with the slot, and then the motor should come right out. The next step is to remove the brake disc. First, take off the washer and keeper. Take your 4mm Allen wrench and loosen all 6 screws and remove them. After you've removed all 6 of the screws, grab the brake disc on the outer edges to avoid getting oil and grease on the surface of the disc. Next, you'll want to flip the motor onto the other side, the logoed side. See, it says CycleBoard logo here. Remove your washer and keeper from this side. Take off your valve cover for your inner tube. Take your 4mm Allen wrench and deflate the tire. Then take your 3mm Allen wrench and carefully remove the 6 screws holding the 2 pieces of the wheel together. After removing your 6 screws from the wheel hub, flip it back over. Take your axle nut and thread it on backwards till it's flush with the face of the axle, giving you a larger surface. Then flip it over. So then you'll grab just the tire, and it might be better to do this on the floor, a solid concrete floor. You'll tap it to release the wheel cover on the other side. And you can lift the motor out, separate the wheel cover. This is your old tire. So take your new tire and inner tube. Make sure to partially inflate your new inner tube and have your valve at the top. In this position, the drive arrow should be pointing to the right. And then take your motor with the valve hole at the top also. Align your valve in the inner tube with the valve hole at the top of the motor, and then slide the tire on. Then take your wheel cover, slide it on the 6 screw slots, push it down by hand while squeezing both sides of the wheel to make sure it's evenly aligned. Then flip it over and reinstall your 6 screws with your 3mm Allen wrench. So after you get all 6 screws screwed in Only screw them slightly firm, and then go back with a crisscross pattern and get them snugly tight. So then cross over to the opposite side. Same here. And cross over. And then lastly. And this will ensure a nice, tight, even fit. Make sure your valve stem is pulled out all the way, and then flip your motor back over. You can remove the axle nut, and now we're ready to reinstall our brake disc. One side of the brake disc will have a directional arrow. You want that side facing the motor. Just line up your screw holes with our 4mm Allen wrench. Reinstall the 6 brake disc screws. So after installing your 6 screws loosely, so you still have a little play in your disc, go ahead and use that same crisscross pattern we did on the wheel cover to tighten them down nice and snug. Be careful not to tighten them too hard and risk stripping the heads. We'll go here. And then we'll cross over to this one. And then finally here for our last crisscross. Last thing you'll want to do is reinflate the tire. 30 psi is listed on the sidewall. That's the low end. You can go up to 40 psi for most riders, even 45 or 50 psi for heavier riders. Replace your valve cover. Now we're ready to reinstall the motor back on your CycleBoard. So reinstall your keepers with a small hole facing upward on both sides. Now you're ready to reinstall your motor with your new tire. It can be helpful to have a second person hold the tire while you lift the swing arm. Make sure that your axle flat sides align evenly with the swing arm. Make sure that your brake disc is aligned with the brake caliper so that it slides in evenly. Next, you reinstall the washers on both sides of your axle. Then your keeper screws with your 4mm Allen wrench. Make sure you line it up with the hole in the top of the keeper. Next, you'll reinstall your axle nuts, both sides. Tighten them down with your 21mm socket. Get these nice and tight. To reinstall your rear fender, take your 3mm Allen wrench, reposition the fender on the swing arm, lining the 5 holes, and reinstall your screws. Make sure they're lined up correctly so you don't cross thread them. So for your final step, you'll reconnect the motor connector, making sure the 3 male pins line up with the 3 female, and then tighten the silver cover nice and snug.